Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the News Agent Podcast. I'm Sia, Head of Content at Goodlord. This is a recording of a webinar with three Goodlord lettings experts, Costas Francesco, Director of Growth, Aaron Stannard, Customer Success Manager, and Lauren Burnett, Mid-Market Manager. So without further ado, on with the podcast.
Look, welcome to today's webinar. We are continuing our theme along the lines of Renters Reform Bill. And also, I'm very pleased today to be joined by two of my amazing colleagues at Goodlord. As for myself, I'm Costas. I am Director of Growth here at Goodlord. But many of you I may know behind the webinar, as have been in the industry for around 20 years, assisting agents along that time. Can I ask Aaron, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi there, and lovely to meet you all. I work as a customer success manager at Goodlord, but prior to that, I spent 12 years in the lettings industry, both working in the corporate and the independent world, most recently as a head of lettings for a multi-branch independent.
And Lauren, tell us about yourself.
Hello. So I oversee the team here at Goodlord who manage our multi-branch agents. And prior to working at Goodlord, I was an agent myself in the lettings industry for around about 15 years, most recent as an associate director, also for a multi-branch agency and only based in London.
Fantastic. So great. So, in terms of today, in terms of this next phase of the Renters Reform Bill and supporting agents in the industry out there, one of the benefits that obviously Goodlord has is, as a group, we have around just under 3,000 agencies that use us. Obviously every day we're having conversations and we get a great insight into what agents are currently, how they're thinking about the Renters Reform Bill, but also some of the options that some of them are taking at the moment to prepare for what may or may not happen, depending in which newspaper or website you plan to read at the moment. Yes, and also thank you to Steph, who's behind the scenes, who'll be running our slides for us today. Steph, would like to go forward? Fantastic. In terms of today's webinar, along with many of our other webinars, they are CPD certified. So as long as you make it to the end, and hopefully we'll make it exciting enough for you to get there, you'll be issued with a certificate to prove that you have been on the webinar. And hopefully we have made a positive change to you, your business, your colleagues, and to your obviously tenants and landlords as well. In addition to this, if you've missed any of our other webinars, please go to the Goodlord website, and there you will see that you can look back on demand on previous webinars. There's been a few at the moment, some really great ones, bringing in specialists from the marketplace from a legal compliance perspective, and they're there to help you understand and guide you through the changes and what kind of things you may need to be thinking about moving forward. In addition to that, two big things are happening as well from a Goodlord perspective. Firstly, we're doing our latest State of the Industry survey. So at the end of this webinar, you'll receive a thank you from us, and alongside that thank you, there'll be a link. Today's webinar is only possible because we get to share lots of good and bad practices sometimes from what agents have attempted. And the survey is another opportunity for you to share your story, for us to look at the marketplace as a whole and see how agents are perceiving the future, and what changes we and other suppliers can help you along that way. In addition to that as well, to support you and your teams, we've actually put together a very short, it's a 1-hour course on the renters reform. So one of the things we're going to be discussing today in quite a bit of detail is what agents are doing to make sure that their teams, that they are knowledgeable, because trust me, a lot of landlords, as you will probably already know, are already doing their homework. And as professionals, we need to be one step ahead of our clients in terms of our knowledge base. So a great way to do that would be to share, and we'll share the link with you once again on our thank you email. Share that with yourself and with your teams. It's a 1-hour course, but what it will do is it will absolutely upskill them in knowing what has been suggested, what that means. So they are having kind of conversations with landlords, tenants, and investors. They know that they have the best information at hand. Thank you. For those of you who may be attending our webinar for the first time and not sure who Good Lord are, firstly, where have you been? But no, secondly, Good Lord are market leaders in pre-tenancy. Okay, so as mentioned before, as a group, we have just under 3,000 different agencies that use our products and services, and we look after our agents throughout the pre-call of the tenancy, everything from starting with your landlord terms of business, automating, and we're the most automated journey a letting agent can have, automating that all the way through to signing documents, collecting money, collecting the rent, paying the rent out, and obviously servicing your tenants as well, all the way through their hopefully positive journey. So if you haven't spoken to us previously, or you'd like to speak to us again to see how we may be able to help your business, please, go to our website. There'll be links, and we're more than happy to give you a free demonstration on how the platform is working today. Okay, so once again, in terms of today, we're going to be talking about preparing for the Renters Reform Bill. We're definitely seeing two camps in the marketplace. We have agents that are saying, well, still have some agents saying it's not going to happen, and therefore I'm just going to sit back and wait until I need to. And then we have other agents that are saying, actually, something will happen, and actually there are some changes I can make to my business today that actually are positive, even if the reform bill is delayed. But there's definitely stuff I can do today that will safeguard myself and the business moving forward. So in terms of the topics we're going to be touching on today, we're going to be touching on conversations of feedback we've had from our customers around establishing a uniform and reassuring message for their customers. So preparing their teams and making sure their teams can have those conversations. The next one is around obviously maintaining your profit margins. We're definitely in a world, and you probably might guess I'm old enough to have been around in 2008, 2009, just about, I think it was 3. But at that point in time, we agents definitely moved from looking at driving more revenue to actually, okay, based on the market that we're working in today, how do we create better margins on the business we do have, while obviously expanding our share of market? Staying compliant, obviously, always important, not just for Renters Reform Bill, but we'll talk you through some of the things you may need to be considering and thinking about from a compliant point of view. And also, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat, and we'll try and pick up as many questions as we can for you. Obviously, a lot of the stuff we're sharing today are ideas from other agents. It's not necessarily our own, but today's more of a, giving you access to potentially what up 3,000 agents, how they're thinking, what they're doing, and how they're moving forward. Okay, so let's kick off with our first part. Wonderful. So, firstly, the first part is all around obviously a uniform message, and what should you be doing to make sure that your team are in the right position for that. Aaron, would you like to kick us off?
Absolutely. So I think before any communication goes out to any of the landlords, what I would be focusing on spending time doing is upskilling the team internally, whether that's through in-house training, whether that's through online webinars such as this one, whether that's through reading blog posts, or even articles in the news. What I would expect is that each member of the team could have a very good understanding of each of the key facts of the Renters Reform Bill, and more importantly, how those have a knock-on effect with the landlords. I certainly wouldn't be expecting them to be able to recite word for word the bill, but the impact that it can have on a landlord and how to overcome any concerns that a landlord would have, I think that would probably be my first port of call.
Fantastic. And Lauren, obviously you've managed branches as well. What kind of things would you be suggesting from a team perspective in preparing for the noise that's out there at the moment?
I think, firstly, I think the reassuring message, you can't necessarily reassure any of your customers unless you're reassuring your staff. And I think it's about putting a positive spin on that as well with your staff, making sure that your staff don't feel that it's as scary as it sounds. It does sound very, very scary, but it's not as scary as it is, we promise. And I think it's just making sure that you're preparing your team for that, and how that they can put every single part of the bill into a positive. You can do that to your team on a positive spin, so that they can then do that moving forward with their customers, their landlords, etc. I think it's just about setting up, making sure that you're setting your team up for a good start, whether that be, like Aaron said, courses, following up, making sure that there's a designated person within the business who will look after the Renters Reform Bill stuff. So anytime that there's any type of update, setting up Google alerts, so that person can then pass that on to the remainder of the team, so everyone is singing off of the same hymn sheet.
No, I think that's actually a great point, actually, because in all lettings businesses, there'll be someone is responsible for the compliance side and making sure that they stay on top, they have the latest information, making sure that the business stays protected. Totally agree with you. That should be exactly the same in your business right now about the Renters Reform Bill. Who is the owner of that? Who is communicating? Who's making sure that everybody has the latest information? Because we know that landlords are asking questions and landlords are reaching out from that perspective. Are there any customer stories at all? Any of our clients that are doing anything specifically, or from a educating staff or getting their staff aligned point of view that you could share?
Absolutely. So I was speaking with an agent just yesterday, and I think ROPA has been key on their mind anyway. And I think what the Renters Reform Bill has done is it's just prompted them to really upskill their staff and start putting them through their professional qualifications, whether that's ALA, Property Mark, because I think legislation is going to play more of a part in how a landlord chooses their agent, and their expectations of an agent and their knowledge is certainly going to be at the all-time high. And I think it just differentiates you above the rest.
No, absolutely. And once again, I think one of the fears for this is we don't have the time. There's lots of work already, and we're all busy, and we're pulling all from all sides at the moment. But this doesn't have to be a big task. It doesn't have to be. I've seen some smart things out there from some agents. Some agents are giving their staff, half an hour a day in their diaries, or a week, just half an hour a week. Within their diaries, where they're using that for either training or to listen to a podcast or to look back at a webinar and just make sure that they really land. And I think the main thing here is don't presume that your staff know, and don't presume that your staff are telling the same message as you might be to your clients. And are you confusing your clients from that perspective? So it's definitely one that we need to think about in terms of aligning that. Without a shadow of a doubt. And one of the things we're going to touch on later, and we've already had a question in from Amin around section 13. We will be touching on that later, I promise you. Obviously, a hot potato there. But I have found personally, from speaking to some agents, that a lot of although the owner of the business and some of the senior people, the more experienced people in the business, understand the difference between section 21 and section 13, that actually when you go down to the ground level within the business, if someone's never had any experience of a section 13 because they've always done section 21s, that actually if a landlord was to ask them what's the difference, they'd be stumped, and that wouldn't really bode well from that perspective. I will answer. I was going to answer a bit later, but I've had a great question from Helen. Helen, what podcasts would you recommend? I would recommend Good Lord's podcast. Being cheeky, there's other great people out there. So I would also, there's some great people just listening to, obviously, Chris Watkin, big fan of Chris Watkin, Stephen Brown. There's other people out there that are sharing lots of information out there. But all of our webinars are on our podcast as well. But also, in addition to that, we do have some unique podcasts as well. So find your way down to Good Lord's site, and you can download our podcast there without a shadow of a doubt. So there's another opportunity for you. And that's a great point as well, because actually there's a great agent in West London that I know. And one of the ways that he himself has made sure that he is staying ahead with information on Renters Reform Bill, and also another way that he's checking that his staff are communicating the right things to his clients, is he's actually listening to the podcast on the way to work. So in terms of fitting it in his day, he has a 40-minute journey in the morning and a 40-minute journey home. So not only listening to podcasts, but also I would hope most agents now will have some kind of facility for recording calls within their business. So he downloads probably half an hour's worth of phone calls every other day, and he listens to those phone calls on the way in, just to make sure that the message is aligned with the business message. And I think that's another great and quick and easy way that agents can help their staff and make sure that business stays front of mind, market leaders. Next part to this is obviously communicating with landlords. So we're hearing from lots of our agents. Have you got any material you can share, please? Lots of my landlords are asking me questions. Is there something I could share? I'd like to give my landlords updates. I'd like to make sure that they're feeling comfortable. Where are we sitting on that one, Lauren?
Yeah, we've actually got some stuff coming out for our customers, so that they have things that they can share with their landlords as well. But I think it's, going back on what we said just previously, that making sure that your talk tracks are in unison. Everyone is singing off of the same hymn sheet. Everyone is saying the same things, and really understanding every single element of the Renters Reform Bill and how it does affect landlords. And again, reassuring them that actually most of the changes, yes, they are annoying, we understand that, but actually reassuring them that most of the changes that are due to come into place are actually things that we can work around and things that are in place already anyway. And it's just, reassuring, again, keep repeating that word, reassuring message, to actually let the landlords know that there are always that there is a positive spin on absolutely everything. Just for an example, in terms of the Section 21 notices, Section 21 notices for agents, the easy way out, right? We're used to doing it. I've been an agent myself. They were the easy way out. And Section 8s were always deemed to be the big scary sections that nobody particularly wants to serve, and landlords are now scared of those. In actual fact, the grounds for Section 8 have been strengthened. So it's kind of saying, reassuring your landlord and sort of saying, okay, so if you want to get your tenants out of the property, what are your main concerns here? Like, what would be the reason as to why you want to get your tenants out of the property? And then sort of saying, right, okay, look, 9 times out of 10, it's because I need to sell. It's because I've got family that need to move into it. I need to move back into it. Good news, Mr. Landlord. The grounds have been strengthened. You can still do that. And it's just making sure that your staff are putting the positive notes out to the landlords.
Yeah, and once again, that's a great point. If we really looked at ourselves in terms of why does a landlord want possession from a good tenant today, and it's either to sell the property or it's or they want to move back into the property themselves, or family now need the property. So that for me is a huge thing in terms of Section 13 strengthens that. So, if that's why landlords would want possession, then to tell them, it's stronger than ever. We've actually got more power behind us now through Section 13, should you need to take the property back for either to sell or to move into. Aaron, anything else? Any other communicator? Obviously, we talked about Section 21, but obviously there's things such as potentially rent caps or rent increases being controlled, and pet insurance and everything else. What other things are you hearing from agents in terms of how they're communicating to their landlords at the moment on those topics?
I think the best agent that I spoke to had sent out a mass email, and for them this was the best opportunity that they had, given that it's such a big legislation change, to review with historic landlords, whether that's your fully managed stock, whether that's historic let-only landlords. They sent out a great email that went out to, I think, in excess of 2,000 landlords, and it was just a really good opportunity to re-engage, highlighting the key points of the Renters Reform Bill, but also adding a really positive spin on it, at how they are tackling it, how they are providing more protection for a landlord, given the potential changes coming on board. And I think the response that they'd had from it, because of the tone of the email, it encouraged any landlord to get in contact, to talk through any concerns that they've got. Actually, off the back of that email, they're now seeing some instructions coming through from historic let-only landlords. So I think as long as you can portray that really knowledgeable insight to the Renters Reform Bill, you can look beyond the headlines and actually break down the detail of the Renters Reform Bill, and maybe that it's not as scary as it's being perceived. It's a really positive message to send to your landlords.
And we always talk about, obviously, agents justifying their fees, and there's a perfect example of an agent that's actually reminding the landlord of why they need their service, why they need them for their support. Fantastic. Let's move on to the next topic. So, conscious of time, and I want to make sure we cover each of the ones. So the next one is all around, obviously, maintaining profit margins. That's why we're all here, I would hope. The first part of that is in terms of adapting your business model. So, Renters Reform Bill is still, it hasn't reached its second reading yet. It's still, there's no date potentially of when this might come in force, and we're still not 100% clear what will come into force. So, why would I be changing my business model now? What kind of things would you be focusing on, Lauren? If you were running your business still today, what kind of things would you be thinking about in terms of preparing yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to happen. And I know there are a few agents that go, it's not going to happen. And we fought this with the Tenant Fee Act. And I think if that's anything to go by, what we learnt there is that we can adapt. The market isn't doomed. It's not over. And we can adapt to make our business still work. One of the first things I would probably be thinking about now is the way that you're collecting fees, how your landlords are paying, whether they're predominantly, I would probably say the let-only landlords. The landlords are paying their fees up front for a duration of a period of term. We don't know what that term is going to be now. We don't know if it's going to be 6 months, 4 months, 12 months, 24 months, etc. So I would start thinking about how we're going to do that. One of those things I would suggest is perhaps working on a monthly rolling, month by month, moving all of your let-only landlord portfolio onto a rent collection portfolio and start taking fees on a month-by-month basis. And this is how you're going to protect your new business sort of coming in, especially from your landlords on your let-only portfolios. That would be one of the first things that I would sort of start thinking about, how you're paying your fees and how you're going to start collecting them moving forward.
Fine. And Aaron, have you seen any sort of agents adapting their business models already, or putting plans in place?
I think historically, let-only fees, for instance, using that as a prime example, have always been taken as one lump sum, whether that's the first month's rent, whether that's a fixed amount, say 350 plus VAT. And I think much like we saw with the tenant fee ban, there's almost a new norm that becomes the way that all agents are doing it. And it could be a monthly let-only fee, whether that's 6%, whether that's 8% of the monthly rent, which then gives you a very easy opportunity to upsell to a fully managed. And I think the more agents that then start thinking along these lines, it will then become what a landlord will expect. So that's sort of the first avenue. And then I think another agent that I was speaking with just last week, whilst not creating a knee-jerk reaction, they had quite a few student lets, and we know that that's the area currently receiving the most scrutiny under the bill. And what they're now doing, albeit they're not changing any of the properties away from the student market, but what they are doing is earmarking any potential property that could well work on the professional sharer market as opposed to the student market as well. So they're just safeguarding their landlords.
Fantastic. And I think one of the key things for me as well, and this is the conversation I was having about 3-4 weeks ago with an agent around, why would I change anything now? Because this is at least a year or two away. And one of the other things that another agent said to me, which I stole and used at that point in time, was the fact that the average tenancies now across the country, maybe different regionally, but across the country, average tenancy length at the moment is moving towards 4.5 years and could go even further. So actually, the tenancies you're setting up today as a business will still be in play when the Renters Reform Bill comes in, and therefore those tenants will still be there. So in terms of thinking about your current contract, your terms of business, how you take fees, how complicated or easy you want to make that, or how well you want to protect that, you are protecting tenancies that will be in play when Renters Reform Bill comes in, and therefore from that perspective, from a contracts point of view, let's think about things like landlord terms of business. So because as a landlord, the signed terms of business with you, and my tenant potentially is going to be there for the next 5 years. What should I be looking for from a terms of business point of view?
From my perspective, I think it's just making sure that you can charge for all of the things that perhaps you're doing for free for your landlord currently. I think particularly with let-only landlords, their expectations of an agent are almost that you're a fully managed landlord agent for them as well. So I think it's just making sure that it's very, very clear in your terms and conditions what you do and what you don't charge for. Whether that's general advice, whether that's popping in to carry out a rent review, whether that's a periodic inspection, just making sure your terms of business caters for anything that you might well need to charge for moving forward to keep that landlord compliant.
Fantastic.
And off the back of that as well, just ensuring that the terminology that you're inputting within your terms of business as well is correct, because now, I mean, especially for renewals, you're going to have terms that say that you can only renew on a fixed term basis, and just ensuring that actually your fees are going to be applicable for the duration of the tenancy on all periodic basis. So just ensuring that actually the terminology used will cover you, to ensure that actually you can continue collecting the fee that you want to charge for as long and for the full duration of that tenancy, for as long as the tenants are in situ.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I do know one agent already that who's changing their landlord terms, because at the moment it says they only get paid on a completed renewal contract, and if renewals are no longer there, then that's going to be a nice sidestep for a lot of their landlords, and not great for the business. In terms of ways to protect your income stream, so we've been through this before. You mentioned, I think, Aaron, you mentioned the tenant fee ban previously, where agents were looking at potentially a 20% drop, and agents on the whole have done an amazing job of actually controlling their businesses and their income streams. What other tips do we have? What are we hearing from agents looking to protect?
I think it's just a case of looking at different revenue streams. Ultimately, we know that monthly management fees are probably one of the best sources of income, and it's almost seen that renewal charges and other lump sum are almost seen as a bonus. So it's a case of, okay, well, what other monthly revenue streams can we look at? Whether that's, for instance, additional insurance policies, whether that is a case of, okay, well, if rent arrears are going to be a factor moving forward, from an agency's perspective, unless they are receiving rent, more often than not, they're not receiving their management fee. So from an agency perspective, it's if your management fee is dwindling, you need to make sure that you are safeguarding not only that landlord, but also you as an agency. So whether it's policies like rent and legal protection that will make sure that even if the tenant's not paying the rent, you're receiving it, and therefore you're receiving your monthly management fee. Or whether it is a case of you start charging for other services that perhaps you've done for free, whether that is a rent review, whether that is issuing a Section 13 notice to increase the rent. I think it's just making sure that everything that you can charge for, every service that you offer to your landlord, is being explored.
Yeah. Also, now you've mentioned Section 13, it's an apology and correction from me. I've been mentioning section 13 rather than Section 8 as the replacement to the alternative for 21. You probably all guess now what's happening in my private life at the moment. A lot of focus and conversations going around Section 13. But yes, absolutely. So obviously Section 8 replacing 21, not 13. So apologies on my behalf for anyone that I may have confused. Moving on, and that's why it's great to have these open forums. There we are. Right, potential losses. So what are the potential losses? Where should an agent be? Where is the risk? Where are agents risking? When we ask our agents what their concerns are, where are the risks at the moment?
One of the risks for the customers that we've been speaking to, or quite a few of our customers have said that the worry is the loss of renewal fees, which naturally, if the tenancy is on a rolling periodic tenancy, it means that the loss of renewal fees, there could be a loss of renewal fees. And I think if those are already charging renewal fees, I think you would just need to work a way of planning renewal fees into your business structure and your model just a lot more cleverly, and making sure that actually, as long as your terms of business are saying that you're going to continue collecting those fees on a month-by-month basis until either party serves notice and the tenancy expires, then you will still continue to take your renewal fees. So in that event, if you are changing your business model and changing the way that you're collecting your fees, I see no reason why you can't continue with your renewal fees. I appreciate that in some capacity, there'll be admin fees where we justify, this is for your, perhaps a one-off fee of £300 plus VAT for the preparation of your, your rental increases and your tenancy agreements, etc. You can now implement that still, and just say you're still going to charge that 300 plus VAT on a sort of 12-month basis. And this is where you can input the Section 13s and the rental increases, and having those conversations, so you can still recoup that money and that revenue in some way. If you're not already charging a renewal fee, then I think now would would be the time that you could actually start doing that by saying that your landlords, again, changing your business model and telling your landlords that we're no longer doing let onlys. We're now collecting fees on a rolling month-by-month basis, and this is going to be until either party serves notice. And I think that does sound quite daunting, does sound quite scary, especially for landlords that have never had to deal with that before, or as a business, you've never dealt with that before. That being said, again, if the tenant fee ban has sort of taught us anything, we can adapt. And we didn't think we were going to be able to recover costs from loss of admin fees from tenants, and we actually managed to work that round into certain businesses, and I know some of our agents did as well, and it wasn't as bad as we all sort of thought that it was going to be. That being said, I do appreciate it was for some, but for a lot it wasn't, and I think it's just sort of taking that into consideration, moving with the times, saying this is how it's going to be and this is how we're going to keep our business going.
A question from Stuart here. Around, thank you, Stuart, for taking the time. How are agents going to claim 12 months worth of fees when the tenant can leave early? So how are agents approaching that dilemma?
I think without a crystal ball, it's going to be so difficult for an agent to know what fee to take up front. And I think that's where it's going to switch from a lump sum payment like we do in a let only currently. And I think that's where the monthly let only fees will be the new norm. I think even if a tenant vacates after 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, whatever that might be, it's going to be about the monthly revenue as opposed to those initial lump sum payments. And as I said, that will just become the new norm.
The alternative to that is you're going to, if you still as an agent want to take that lump sum up front, it just means that you're going to open up a can of worms in terms of having to reimburse or refund any element of overpayment of fees if at any point the tenants do vacate sooner than the 12-month period. It's just whether or not that's going to be something that you want to dive into or sort of make a part of your new sort of structure in terms of fees.
Yeah, and we're really seeing lots of different models in our customer base. People are already thinking about, I've heard of agents, as you've mentioned, taking a higher implementation fee, if you will, for the tenancy, so that less of it is dependent on the length of the tenancy. Other agents I've spoken to are looking at collecting their fees over a 10-month period, where they're currently collecting over a 12-month period, and securing their fees that way, and then using that balance for the next cost. So definitely a few things being trialed out there within the marketplace. I'm conscious we haven't spoken about. Oh, sorry, Aaron.
Just moving on to that, I think what we aren't talking about is the fact that there is a real shortage of supply in the rental market at the moment. It's very, very well documented. And I know Ben Beadle mentioned that the average tenancy length at the moment is 4 years. So I think those cases where tenancies are fewer than 12 months will become fewer and further between, particularly if more landlords do exit the market. There's fewer choice available for tenants. So I'm hoping this isn't going to be an obstacle for many agents to overcome, to be perfectly honest.
That's it. Yeah, thank you. Question from Sarah or Sarah. Apologies if I've got one of them right. Anyway, around how our agents planning to deal with rent paid up front. So where it's a requirement of the reference, so the tenant has to pay up a lump sum up front. How is that going to be dealt with moving forward? Any thoughts on that?
So this, I could probably link it back to one of the most recent webinars that we had with the solicitor from Dutton Gregory. And there's not going to be a restriction on agents taking 12 months rent up front. It's just the wording in the tenancy agreement, as opposed to it being 12 months up front in one lump sum, it's 12 individual sets of 1 month. So albeit it's the same outcome, it's simply just a case of the wording. So if we find that a tenancy does end within that 12-month period, then sadly a landlord will probably have to reimburse a tenant the money that they've paid, but ultimately the landlord will have the peace of mind that they've got the rent in advance.
Before we're moving on, any other thoughts before we move on? Anything else we're hearing? I'll take that as a move on Costas then. Okay, let's move into our next section, remaining compliant. Okay, I think we've probably touched on a few of the things already. I'm also aware we've got quite a lot of questions coming in, so I'll make sure that we have enough time to answer as many questions as we can as well. But in terms of keeping up to date, so you've run branches before. What kind of things would you be focusing on from that perspective, making sure that you're keeping up to date, and how would you be doing that?
I mean, in terms of compliance, use good Lord. No, I'm joking. But in terms of I would just, ensuring, again, you've got a designated person within the business that looks after your compliance and just keeping on top of all of this, making sure that all of the terms of business are where they need to be. Start prepping for your tenancy agreements and your clauses to make sure, your wordings or on your short tenancies. We don't necessarily know how or what it's going to impact right now. You can't necessarily get those tenancy agreements ready right now, but just to ensure that you're sort of staying, up to speed with all of that, so to speak, as well. Double checking webinars, podcast, as Costa said at the beginning as well, just to ensure that you're not missing a trick anywhere, and that your staff are fully up to speed.
Aaron, anything to add?
Currently, I think it's just paperwork. There's not been any legislation changes currently implemented regarding the Renters Reform Bill. I think it's just planning in terms of tenancy agreements. If and when we know they need to be updated, make sure you know who you're going to go to, have a solicitor in mind, or start having conversations and start networking with various different professionals to utilize those contacts when the legislation does change. You know immediately who your port of call will be to make sure your tenancy agreement is up to scratch.
And one thing we haven't touched on, and I'm sure there will be agents with us today that are focusing on student lets. Thinking about the previous conversations we've had over the last sort of 40 minutes, Aaron, you're our student let specialist, if I can call you that, within our business. You have most experience in this. If I'm a student let agent, what kind of things should be going through my mind at the moment?
I think first and foremost, I'd probably say try not to panic. I think certainly from everything that I've read online, certainly from watching as many webinars as I can, the student let area is the one that is facing the most scrutiny. I think Scotland, there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. It's quite well published that a lot of the student landlords there are leaving the market because if they are losing tenants mid-tenancy, for instance, say in October, November, actually they're finding it really difficult to find new tenants midway through the season. So I'm hoping that might be one area of the bill that does face some changes. But also what it is a good opportunity to do is start having conversations with your landlords, bracing them for worst case, that okay, this could happen midway through a tenancy, but in the majority of cases it won't. Or perhaps it's time to be having those conversations with landlords to say, maybe now if you carried out some refurbishment works, it could well work extremely well on the professional sharing market, not just relying on the student market. So I think try and do what you can to get ahead of the game, but also don't panic too much until we've got an exact outcome of what it looks like.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you. From a compliance perspective, what is there concern in the market? Are agents worried at all? Is this or is it business as usual?
There's always concern over legislation. I think so many things can go wrong with lettings because there's so much legislation to adhere to. But nevertheless, I think agents have been operating, working with industry change for X amount of years. And it's always going to be a focus moving forward. So I think there's always a key focus to legislation. And as long as agents just keep doing what they're doing, whether that's bringing in systems like Good Lord, excuse the plug, to make sure they remain compliant, then there shouldn't be a worry moving forward.
Absolutely. And Nicole has actually made a valid point. I've just seen in the questions that Good Lord will be on top of any new tenancy sort of templates, the changes, legislation changes, etc. So these will automatically be inputted onto the platform just to ensure that you are compliant, Nicole. So we will have you covered for sure.
Absolutely, yes. So yeah, those who aren't Good Lord users, the majority of our customers do use our own contracts that are obviously compliant at all times, and therefore it's another thing to help you sleep at night, if you will. Fantastic. But next slide for us. Thank you. So we've got some questions that are coming through. One of the questions we have is around opportunities from Steph. So in terms of opportunities, where are the opportunities here in the Renters Reform Bill? Where should, tenant fee ban, although that was a challenge, tenant fee ban also brought in agents. I know a lot of agents actually that the bit where they were kicking themselves was the fact they didn't make the changes before and actually waited for a tenant fee ban to push them towards driving more revenue. But where do you see the opportunities at the moment, Aaron?
I know I keep circling back to it, but I think this is a great opportunity to re-engage with your let-only landlords. I think there's going to be a lot of nerves from them because they know that this is one of the biggest legislation changes. And for many of them, it might just be that final nudge that they need to convert to a fully managed service. And for me, I think that's probably going to be the greatest opportunity. In addition to being able to have a pet insurance policy in place for whether that's existing tenants, whether that's any new tenants moving forward. We saw with the tenant fee ban that a deposit was capped, whereas historically you would always take a slightly larger deposit if there was a pet involved. Whereas now actually for the landlords that have been extremely reluctant to take pets, if you can now reassure them that there will be an insurance policy in place to cover any additional damages, I think that's really going to ease a lot of the concerns.
And Lauren, any opportunities there from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this gives you the opportunity to really establish yourself as a market leader and against your competitors. And I think, whilst Aaron has touched base on the fact that you can make contact with all of your let-only landlords, I think it's a case of actually making contact with any landlord on your portfolio to really have these conversations and really show them your worth as an agent. Your rent collection landlords could convert into fully managed landlords. Your let-onlys converting into rent collection. And I think as well, it's just like, again, as I said, establishing yourself as a market leader and making contact with sort of valuations you've recently had as well, making sure that, you're really showing your worth as an agent. To show them that actually the reason why they should come on board with you is because you know exactly what it is that you're talking about. You're ready. You're prepped for the Renters Reform Bill. You know how this is going to work. You know what changes are being implemented. You can really reassure them. And this is the thing that the landlords, I think, are going to head towards. Conversations with landlords that you might have not had conversations with for a really long period of time. Those really nice landlords you've got on your books. They're very easy. They don't cause you much sort of trouble. You don't really have to speak to them on a regular basis. These really are going to be your little golden tickets, because 9 times out of 10 these landlords also have properties with other agents. If you're reaching out to these landlords and you're having these conversations and you're prepping them for this is where you're going to be able to then open yourself up to more of their portfolio if they do happen to have any.
No, absolutely. And within our on-demand webinars, there is a whole webinar on landlord MOTs and actually how much you can find out from those MOTs. And I also know from another supplier in the market where when agents first join them, and one of their services is around identifying landlords in their area. But one of the first things that normally happens to an agent who believes that they have a full understanding of their landlords is they realise that actually their landlords have got a lot more properties than they ever knew, and some of them being rented out through other agents. So having conversations now is a real opportunity to have conversations with your existing landlords at the moment, whether it's around protecting their thought process in terms of potentially thinking about selling, and maybe starting with the ones where the tenancy renewals are coming up earliest, and working your way through there. But also, but on the flip side, there are still landlords out there that are investing. They're seeing this as a really good marketplace. It's a buyer's market at the moment, and therefore there's opportunities out there for landlords that can and have the means to grow, and actually having those conversations, because some of them might need the expertise of an agent or the connections that our agents have in terms of the right way to raise that capital, the right way to identify the right properties. And obviously, if you can help those landlords in increasing their portfolios, hopefully you'll be the agent that they select to look after them once they've added into their portfolio. So that's another real benefit there as well. Okay, just going through the questions. Aaron, how do we feel about taking on a student letting question about Scotland? So put you on the spot a bit here.
Let's give it a go. I'll do everyone else.
So do we know how the Scottish market, how the Scottish agency market is coping with obviously student lets with no fixed terms at the moment?
I think, dare I say, it's through Women of Career. No, I'm joking, of course. I think what we're seeing is that traditionally students have always run the course of their tenancy. We know that their university course will run from September to June, July. So whether a 10-month tenancy becomes the norm, certainly what I'm reading online is that tenants are vacating when they're supposed to. So there hasn't really been too many issues. All that it's done is it's caused a few concerns with landlords. Worst case scenario that a tenant could vacate after 3 months, which is why they're now looking down the professional route. But I think a lot of them are simply sticking to what they've done, and it's not presenting to be much of a problem at all.
Fantastic. No, thank you for that. Questions coming from, actually a great statement from Darren. Darren, thank you for taking the time, around the fact that, renters reform isn't a problem. Landlords have always had worse to deal with and they've survived. Therefore, tax breaks was a bigger impact to landlords than the rent reform bill will ever be. But actually, the biggest challenge at the moment is mortgage rates, and those landlords that are coming up for renewals on their mortgages, and that's where it's really hurting at the moment. Any thoughts on that, or do you want me to take this one?
I think what we're seeing is certainly based on the inflation data that was released yesterday. Inflation is coming down. Hopefully, mortgage interest rates will follow suit. So it might just be a case of reassuring the landlords that the rental market is improving. Rental figures have gone up. There is certainly scope there to increase rents beyond your typical £25 or £50 a month that historically they've done. And that might be something that can be reviewed further down the line. Try and weather the storm. Try and increase the rent in line with market rates. Try and cover as many losses as possible, but know that there should be light at the end of the tunnel when perhaps in 2-3 years' time, mortgage rates are far more reasonable than they are now.
Yeah, and I think this draws me back to a lesson that I learned during COVID. So right at the start of COVID, what we saw from this is what I learned from some really great agents was that the first thing they did was to go back through all their live tenancies and understand their tenants a little bit better. So who was working in the food industry, who was working in certain industries that are going to be most impacted. And what they did, we've got to get on the front foot for their businesses and for their landlords, was to ring out to those tenants first to say, how are you coping? What's happening? Are you on furlough? Is your business closing down? Is there any way we can help? And get on the front foot with them and with the landlord, and that was a real benefit in understanding your customer base. And I think this is another example around mortgages. A question I would give to agents is: Do you know which of your landlords actually have mortgages in place at the moment, and which ones don't? Do you understand which of your landlords have big mortgages, and which ones this actually will put into a negative value, and which ones actually will still be able to run positively with the rent they receive at the moment? So definitely something that if you're having those conversations with landlords, if you are reaching out and you're not aware at the moment, if you don't get involved on the mortgage and the finance side with your landlords, is really to understand where are the risks in my customer base. Where can I protect myself most? And understanding my clients is probably a really great start from that perspective. Another question. So obviously we touched on the benefits of moving now from an annual one-off fee going onto a monthly fee in preparation for the Renters Reform Bill and moving forward. There are concerns. So James, thank you for your question. There are concerns of a black hole in agents' revenue. Obviously, they're used to getting that money up front, and therefore, over the 11 months of implementing a change within their business, that will create a black hole, and probably a black hole for some agents that maybe a step too far. Any ideas or thoughts on those agents that may be a little bit trapped from taking that approach at the moment?
I think what Aaron said earlier is again sort of showing your worth and charging for the things actually now you can charge for to try and sort of help recover that loss there, whether that be sort of compliance, whether that be legal advice, whether that be additional documentation, fees such as the rent increases, etc. Just sort of trying to charge sort of where you can whilst you can at this moment in time to help sort of cover that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and once again, I think for Jason, from my perspective, you don't have to do it all overnight as well. You can step into this. There's definitely benefits. There's definitely clear benefits once we're in a Renters Reform Bill world to taking your fees monthly without a shadow of a doubt, especially if renewals will no longer be a thing. So I think, step in it now and managing that through your business rather than potentially in future having to do a one cut that obviously will set you back for some time, or potentially allow your competitors an edge over you. So totally understand that. The follow up to that, James is asking what's Good Lord doing to assist agents in this world. I can assure you, James, we are already looking at this. We are looking at how we charge our own fees. We are looking at the services that we put through our platforms. We're looking at what other services agents can charge for. We've talked a lot about, when we talked a lot about profit today, and we've talked a lot about profit margins, we've talked a lot about increasing revenue and to increase profit. But actually, one of the things that really hit hard on the tenant fee ban was looking at your existing businesses to see where you can make cuts. There's two ways of making profits. The first one is finding more business, which is a tough gig at the moment, although still very possible. And the other one is obviously looking at how you can save existing costs within your business today. Technology moves on, and a shout out for all our fellow suppliers out there. Typically, a client uses a small proportion or a proportion of the services that they pay for and is available to them. So one of the other recommendations I'd definitely be giving to agents at the moment is reach out to your existing suppliers, find out what other features, find out what other services, find out what else they offer. Is there something you've missed? A lot of these features that offers, there'll be free add-ons. A lot of these things aren't necessarily paid for, but they will be saving you time. They will be helping you manage your relationships with your clients a lot better. So next time you speak to your suppliers, whoever they may be, ask the question: is there anything that you offer that I don't use today? And explain to me why I might want to start using that service or feature within your portfolio. I think you might be amazed. And also the content wise, another question from Hannah is around content and how do I keep up with content, and how do I write this content? There is so much content out there, so much great content out there, not just from Good Lord, but I think if you took an hour just to look through some of our blogs. That can also be landlord facing, so you can literally copy and paste and make it your own. But there's lots of stuff out there that you can use to help you communicate with your landlords and so on. I saw a hand up.
I was just going to say that one of my agents that I was speaking with just the other day, knowing that their model might be switching to a monthly revenue stream, what they actually did, it was a really great opportunity for them to look at their current business model, look at their current income, and also look at their current expenses, breaking it down to a very fine detail, because from that, what monthly income you'll need to start generating in order to be cost neutral. And then anything above that is pure profit. So it's a really good opportunity to look at your existing business model, look at all of your costs, and then understand moving forward what you need to achieve to cover your costs. You can break that down to how many new lets you need to achieve with perhaps a slightly different setup fee, taking away the lump sum payments that you'll get from a let only. So it's, from an agency perspective, I think a lot can be done in the lead up to this to understand your business in great detail.
And then one last question. Apologies, there are so many questions that they won't be able to answer them all, but we will come back to you offline. Make sure that we can answer as many of these as possible for you. But one of the things we haven't touched on, I've had quite a few questions. I think we need to touch on it. Is obviously rent caps and rent increases. How agents thinking, or how agents managing their landlords at the moment in terms of the proposals around rent increases moving forward.
In the conversations that we have had with a lot of our customers have been that they're doing this on a realistic basis, and I think this is obviously to avoid any future sort of issues moving forward. Whilst there's no cap in terms of how much you can increase the rent as long as it's in market value, I think it's all about being realistic as well, making sure that you're really using your comparables, things that you've previously let, that your competitors have previously let, just to ensure that they're putting their landlords in a really good space. Naturally, there's going to be there will be a few occasions where they will go to the Fair Rent Tribunal, and it will be up to them. They'll obviously decide as to if that increase, whether it's very below market value, and the increase, although its market value is exceptionally high, if they agree to that increase or not. But I think a lot of the conversations that we've been having with our customers is very much been on a realistic, let's just get you the market value, and these are the reasons as to why we think your property is worth this in today's market.
Yeah, and there's been some numbers recently released that actually showed that where it has gone to judicial review in terms of the amounts of increases, there's been as many judgments to say that actually you could charge more as there has been you can't charge that much. So there's definitely a two-way there. So I'm conscious of time. We have 1 minute left. I want to thank everybody firstly, thank my panel, and also thank everyone for making the time this morning. If you're watching us on catch up, I hope you had a great day, weekend, month before visiting us, but great to see you too.